Some breaking news at this point in time as far as Trump's fresh attack on Indian economy. The US president said, and I quote, "Don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together. For all I care." Well, that is the big breaking news that we're getting you at this point in time. Trump once again lashing out at India, saying that India and UK, I beg your pardon, Russia, can go down together as far as the economy is concerned. Trump's fresh attack on Indian economy. The US president said, and I quote, "I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together. For all I care." Trump is not mincing his words over there. He is hitting out at India and perhaps India's ties with Russia. He is taking a jab at their economies, saying that I do not care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together. For all I care. Strong words over there from the US President Donald Trump in a fresh attack on India's economy, where the US President has said, and I quote, that I do not care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies together. I will be taking you through the entire quote, what exactly Trump had mentioned. He said, I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together. For all I care. We have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. And let's keep it that way. And tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still the president, to watch his words. He's entering a very dangerous territory. My colleague Verghese is joining me right now to get us all the details. Well, Verghese, what do you make of these back-to-back true social posts by the US President Donald Trump? He's not mincing his words. He's lashing out at India, and he has not taken India-Russia ties very kindly.
Well, one of the biggest factors has been the buying of oil from Russia, and that has been almost 35% when it comes to our sourcing of oil. And it is a huge foreign currency earner for Russia, especially when it battles its war in Ukraine. So it is part of a larger foreign policy effort to curtail the flow of foreign currency and legitimate foreign currency into Russian hands. And this is part of that effort by the Trump administration so that they can, in fact, bring the funding of the war to a halt. So clearly, at the end of the day, what happens is that while pressurizing India over this trade deal, and especially on the question of oil, it is interesting to note how Trump has in fact targeted Indian entities who in fact have been buying oil from Russia. So clearly over here, he has said that Russia and India can take their dead economies down together, clearly hinting that there could be sanctions ahead, especially the tariff could be just the first part of it. Now, the larger question is what happened to the friend Trump that India has been in fact looking at, but it looks like more of an interest when it comes to curtailing the war in Ukraine and to stop the flow of Russian oil into the international market that has been through India, and therefore this attempt has been carried out. But India has always said that its resources will be diversified, and it will in fact only look at ensuring its interests, and trade with Russia when it comes to oil is also part of India's interest that it is looking after. But clearly the trade deal is no longer a trade deal that we see normally. It is not just about a Trump sponsored trade deal or the US looking for better tariffs. It is also about relationship that India is having with other countries that seems to be in fact irking Trump. Especially he has been against the BRICS because the BRICS currency or the alternate currency to the dollar is something that they had been talking about. Now in BRICS you have two populous nations. You have a South American countries also that is part of it, and you have a South Africa also part of it. So these are major economies in their own realm of influences, and therefore with Russia also being tagged into it, it could actually be a serious contender to the dollar's strength as an international currency. So Trump wants to avoid it at any cost. So no longer this is about trade and tariff. It is about trying to sidebox India into what the US wants when it comes to keeping its dollar dominance on hold. So this is not something that seems to be just veering on the line of economy, but also with strategic geo interests that are also being looked into.
But Verghese, what option lies ahead with India if Donald Trump is going to constantly use these social media posts to try and arm twist India over its ties with Russia, or for that matter, India's oil import from Russia, which is over 35%. These are also pressure tactics that Donald Trump is playing with India. But what options lie ahead for India?
Well, if you look at India, India has always seen these kind of pressures that have been put by U.S. presidents, and it's not the first time that a U.S. president has been putting this kind of pressure. We had seen in 1971 when shipments of wheat were held back and India did find another source to get it. That's why India believes in not keeping all the eggs in one basket. But the rather short-term effects of what Trump has been trying to do could have an impact on the Indian economy. But in a globalized world where interdependence is what is there, protectionism by the American president of his economy alone is not going to suffice. It's going to, in fact, have its own problems on its domestic front. The skilled labor shortage, the H-1B visa, a lot of people have been saying is one that built the Silicon Valley in the United States, and therefore they do not have the local talent to, in fact, ensure that they can keep their services going on. So, though this protectionism measure was what Trump was looking at, initially it was the United States that spoke about liberalization economies and globalized economies and multinational economies. The same United States is now talking about protectionism, something that India had earlier been and had moved out of. So since the world has been beating the Americans in their own game when it comes to their economy, Trump is now trying to create a large-scale disruption in the world economy that had favored other countries when it comes to the trade surpluses with the United States. So this is part of the strategy for global disruption to ensure that new rules govern soon, and those new rules will in fact put some of these trade surpluses in balance for the United States. So it's all part of that big strategy that the United States is in fact pursuing at the moment, Sam.
But Verghese, while you are saying there can be a new trade order of sorts, where does India fit in the scheme of things? And are we to believe that all the conversations, meetings that the Minister of Industry and Supply of India, Piyush Goyal, who was there in US for a very long time, he kept going there for meetings, kept coming back, his entire team was negotiating, that did not really fall through with US? Or is there still room for US President to revisit his decision?
One of the sticking points, Samya, has always been the agricultural sector. And you know that in India, when it comes to the agricultural sector, it has always been a protected sector, especially from whichever government has been in power, whether it was the NDA or the Congress-led alliances. So they have always protected the Indian interest when it comes to the issue of farmers. Now, the U.S. has been asking for greater access into India's agri market, and that is something that has in fact resulted in one of those big deadlocks that we see. And clearly there have been several items such like soybean oil and other things that the US has been looking for exporting, and India already produces in large quantities. So these are some of the small products that we're talking about, the agriculture sector, which if US is given free access with its ability to compete with its own subsidies within the Indian market, it would become detrimental for our own farmers. So that's why you have the talks veering around all these aspects of agricultural products that could come from the United States and compete with efficiently with our products here, and probably even ensure that our agri market in certain aspects could in fact collapse also. This is a fear that has been raised by those who understand on the rural market, especially when it comes to the APMCR and how things go, trade goes when it comes to agricultural products there. So clearly, it is a protectionism that India is looking at, and which the United States doesn't want when it comes to it. It wants free access to that Indian market, especially when it comes to agriculture. Agriculture being Indian agricultural market being one of the largest in the world, and therefore U.S. are trying to in fact go ahead and trying to dump its surplus agricultural products into our market. So that has been completely fended off. Though there have been efforts to in fact ensure that some of the high-paying industrial jobs could be in fact shifted from India, or rather Indian companies could invest in the United States. Well, it doesn't seem to be at the level that the United States wants, and therefore that has also been a kind of sticking product. But clearly enough, there is one big industry that or sector that the United States has been looking for long, and they have been looking long, especially after from 1990s onwards, especially out of the fall of the Soviet Union. It is the defense industry, and recently India has in fact shown interest in the S-500 systems and asked for follow-up orders on the S-400 systems. Clearly, this has also rattled the United States, because the United States was in fact trying to sell its THAAD missile systems. So there we have it, that this particular industry is something that the U.S. has been looking at. They want the Indian defense industry to veer out of the influence of the Russian ambit, because that is another industry in which the Russians have been earning foreign currency from India when it comes to this particular trade. And there have been several government-to-government trades that have happened with the Russians. There have been large-scale upgradation programs that have been assigned with them, and therefore the weapons that the Russians have been supplying have been the mainstay of the Indian armed forces for a very long time. So clearly dependence on Russia is something that India has been having for quite some time. But right now, the United States believes that a lot of the trade surplus deficit that they have been facing can be set right if India makes large-scale defense orders, and that is one sector that is also we are looking at competing. But the United States again being frustrated because there have been several instances in which they did want to in fact make through that. We have the F-16's repackaged deal, the F-21, which was supposed to be given for the MMRCA program, but we chose the Rafales, and that had the American products like F-18 and F-15 Eagle were not in the winning race. That had in fact rattled the Americans as well. And clearly when you have another tender going on, they have been pushing for it, but again we are looking at other platforms when it comes to the MMRCA. So clearly the Americans have not been able to make success in that sector as much as they wanted, though they have had a significant rise in that sector with India in fact diversifying its arms purchases, even taking in American arms as well. But that sector is something that the Americans think is crucial enough to arrest the trade surplus balance that is there with India, so they want that also opened up.
Absolutely, Verghese. But clearly, as far as India is concerned, this is going to become a major sticking point for India. What do we know about Indian government's end for an outreach towards the U.S. Government counterpart to ensure that the talks continue and there can be some room way by which these tariffs can be revised? Well, that is the big breaking news that we've gotten you at this point in time. As far as Trump's fresh attack on Indian economy is concerned, the US president has said, and I quote, that I don't care what India does with Russia, they can take their debt economies down together for all I care. Well, that is what Donald Trump has said a short while ago after announcing 25% tariff on India only yesterday. He has now once again lashed out at India and has lashed out at India-Russia ties. He goes on to say that we have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way and tell Medvedev, the failed former president of India, former president of Russia, who still thinks that he is the president, to watch his words.